You've mentioned a few of the common legal tools that you use already: revocable trusts, buy-sell agreements, things like
Mhm.
that. What are some of the other things that you haven't mentioned yet? Entity structures, other types of trust. What are the types of things you normally find common being used in business legacy or succession planning?
Well, a lot of his LLCs,
Yeah.
as I mentioned, limited liability partnerships, family partnership entities, obviously corporations, whether it's a S corporation, C corporation, some charitable remainder trusts
Hmm.
that can play a role as well. And it's really making, prenuptial agreements and
Hmm.
postnuptial agreements, especially in blended families,
Okay.
should be addressing what, if there's a bit one one of the spouses is a business owner. How is that going to be distributed? And if there's a prenuptial or postnuptial, right? This would be a second marriage. How does that relate to the business succession planning?
Hmm.
So it's all of these moving parts. I always say the documents need to speak to each other.
Okay. And we've talked a little bit about identifying that successor.
Right.
Um,
And it could be a
what
team. It could be
Yeah, and
what?
what happens and how do you address a situation where maybe the ideal successor isn't the oldest child or the wife or
Right.
isn't a family member at all? Talk us through just how you might put that planning together.
Absolutely. And I think many times, a lot of times kids do not want to take over their parents' business. They just have no interest, right? And so that's where I think the person needs to look internal.
Hmm.
They really need to look internal and say, well, do I have a key employee that can step in?
Hmm.
Or do I need to look external from my business, right? Maybe I need to think about selling the business sooner rather than later, or waiting till I become incapacitated, or waiting till I die. And so that
Hmm.
you can get that key member to step in. And, I mean, and it, I say a dentist, a doctor, it could be, chiropractor, any service, or just even whether it's an electrical business, a
Hmm.
construction business, you sometimes you look outside of the family member, right? And I think you need to have those tough conversations with the family members and say, "Hey, look, you don't want anything to do with this business, but you want the proceeds, probably, right? They want the income, they want the money from it. So I'm gonna look outside and I'm gonna bring on a partner, right? And there's gonna be a succession plan of 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. A succession plan does not have to be just when you die. It could be progressional, so that you start, it's a 5-year plan, it's a 7-year plan. What does this plan look like? And I think if you address it, then you avoid having to go to court. You avoid that probate. You
Yeah.
avoid the family feud with the children, and whether it's your spouse as
Mhm.
well.
What do you advise business owners who are worried about sharing this plan they've created? Worried about it creating tension amongst their children. And like, is it often best to have this neutral professional like you involved to avoid those types of things?
Well, of course, I think it is,
Yeah.
right? Um, because I have another situation that I just thought of too, where I believe there's let's see, yeah, there's 5 kids,
Okay.
and only two of the children are involved in the parents' business, right? Super successful, lots of contracts, etc. But the other three feel like, just because I'm not involved in the business, I think I should reap the benefits, right? Like, we've grown up in the same family, and this and that. Just I chose to do something different. And so, yeah, I think that's where, and but then the flip side is the two that are involved in the business, they're the everyday grind, and they're, waking up
Yeah.
at, 5 in the morning, getting to the office at 6, and, working those, 12-hour days. So I do believe that it's a family discussion. And sometimes you could even have like a moderator for the family discussion.
Hmm.
Or I think many times though, if you sit down like with a professional like me, and then you can kind of walk them through what this looks like. And you're sort of the neutral party, right? You're Switzerland and
Mhm.
saying, okay, if you're not going to work the business, you don't want to work the business. Well, this person is going to work the business. So then that's where you
Mhm.
can look at the whole plan. Well, maybe they have a rental property that's worth, $10 million and the business, they're going to get a $10 million, or it doesn't matter if it's 10 to 1 or a half a million, right? It's
Mhm.
so that at the end of the day, it equalizes. And I think that's where siblings, right?
Mhm.
The litigation, probate litigation, it's usually about siblings fighting, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Siblings are fighting because, I always believe that it has to do with, when they were little, mom or dad gave them, those extra jelly beans and so they
Mhm.
never forgot it. But now we're talking dollars and
Yeah.
cents.
Yeah.
And so I think it's super important to sort of, the pros and the cons, and then
Mhm.
having a neutral party step in and sort of lead the discussion, if you will. Or
Okay.
but then sometimes families will be like, "You know what? I don't wanna have this discussion. This is what I'm going to do. The kids can figure it out when I pass." I'm like, "Well, okay."
Yeah.
We'll probably end up in probate court, and we'll be litigating for the next,
Yeah.
7 to 10 years, but if that's what you want, then
Yeah.
okay.
How often should we review and update these? Is it different than just the estate plan because things are happening with the business all the time? Or is it like whenever something happens, or is it every year? How often should we
Yeah,
do it?
well, it depends on the business that you're running,
Okay.
right? But I would say that, you always hear the term work on your business instead of in the
Hmm.
business, right? So I think when you're taking that time out to work on the business, then that should be once a year, right? At
Okay.
least. I mean,
Yeah.
working on the business, I do a quarterly meeting with my peer groups that
Hmm.
I'm working on the business so that I'm not in the business.
Yeah.
And I'm just a little law firm, right?
Hmm.
But the depending on your size, at least once a year, you should be having, whether it's your board meeting
Hmm.
or, family meeting, spousal meeting, whatever it is, it should be at least once a year or a major event
Okay.
that triggers, whether it's a death, incapacity, or a large contract, right?
Hmm.
Or maybe your business is taking a different road. Um, so life events, absolutely. But I would say at a minimum, at least once a year.
Okay. Now, I'm a business owner myself, and I'm sorry to say, like, you've said some things during this interview where I'm like, oh crap, I need to do that. Um,
Sorry,
what,
sorry, I didn't mean to.
what are the first? And I thought I have all these estate plans, and I've thought about the business succession. I've got my wife involved.
Yeah.
But what are the first 2 or 3 steps that you recommend a business owner taking in the next 90 days if they haven't done any of this?
Read your documents,
Okay.
right? Start
Uh-huh.
with reading the documents and then identify who you want to run the business at incapacity, right? I think that's really key. Incapacity, not just death,
Hmm.
right? Um, and it could also be right now, maybe you want to take a few extra trips. You got to have that second person. Who is that second person in case you need to take an emergency or
Hmm.
you want to take a vacation, right? And you don't want the business to work for you. You want to work for the business.
Hmm.
And of course, your trust and your entity documents and taking a look at a buy sell agreement or some sort of management succession planning. I
Hmm.
think those are sort of the
Okay.
3 keys that you wanna take a look at, um, and say, "Oh, I need to sit down. I need to go and take a long lunch or, close the
Yeah.
office, leave the office and go work on this."
And
I know it's easier said than
yeah.
done.